Captain Sarah Mitchell gripped the control stick of her F-16 Fighting Falcon with steady hands, her knuckles white against the black leather of her flight gloves. At 29,000 feet above the Nevada desert, she was practicing something that made her fellow pilots at Nellis Air Force Base shake their heads in disbelief. Manual instrument flying with her heads-up display, intentionally disabled. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. While other pilots at the 414th Fighter Squadron relied on advanced flight management systems, autopilot engagement, and computer-assisted navigation, Sarah insisted on maintaining skills that the modern Air Force considered obsolete. She flew by feel, reading air pressure changes through the aircraft's responses, navigating by celestial positioning when GPS systems were available, and landing using visual cues that predated digital assistance by decades. Her instructors called her methods dangerously antiquated. Her fellow aviators whispered that she was afraid of technology. But when enemy surface-to-air missiles would soon streak through contested airspace toward a disabled squadron trapped behind enemy lines, Sarah's old-school flying skills would prove to be the only thing standing between 12 American pilots and certain death. The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete runways of Nellis Air Force Base as Sarah completed her pre-flight inspection of aircraft number 870257. Unlike her squadron mates who performed cursory visual checks before trusting their digital diagnostic systems, Sarah conducted thorough manual inspections that her grandfather had taught her during childhood visits to his crop dusting operation in rural Montana. She ran her hands along the aircraft surfaces, feeling for stress fractures that computer sensors might miss. She visually inspected hydraulic lines, checked fuel levels manually, and tested control surface movement through physical manipulation rather than electronic verification. The ritual took an additional 20 minutes compared to standard procedures, but Sarah had discovered maintenance issues through manual inspection that digital systems had failed to detect. Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, the squadron's operations officer, watched Sarah's meticulous preparation routine with barely concealed frustration. Harrison was a product of the Air Force's technological revolution, having earned his wings during an era when computer assistance was becoming standard across all aircraft platforms. He viewed Sarah's traditional methods as inefficient relics that slowed mission preparation and compromised operational readiness. "Mitchell," Harrison called out as he approached her aircraft, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had overseen countless missions using cutting-edge aviation technology. "Your pre-flight procedures are taking twice as long as necessary. Modern diagnostic systems provide more accurate assessments than manual inspection techniques." Sarah continued her visual examination of the aircraft's air intake, checking for foreign object debris that automated systems might overlook. "Sir, manual inspection allows me to detect irregularities that computers are programmed to consider within acceptable parameters. Sometimes what's technically acceptable isn't actually safe." Harrison pulled out his tablet computer, which displayed the aircraft's complete diagnostic readout in real time. Every system showed green status indicators, confirming that the F-16 was fully mission-capable according to the Air Force's advanced monitoring protocols. "Mitchell, this aircraft has been cleared by 3 separate computerized systems. Your additional checks are redundant and waste valuable training time." The philosophical divide between Sarah and her commanders reflected a broader transformation within the Air Force. Modern pilots were trained to trust sophisticated flight management systems that could calculate optimal flight paths, manage fuel consumption, and execute precision maneuvers with minimal human input. These systems had dramatically improved flight safety statistics and mission success rates across all aircraft platforms. Sarah represented an increasingly rare breed of aviator who maintained manual flying skills alongside Technological proficiency. Her training philosophy had been shaped by her grandfather, Colonel Thomas Mitchell, who had flown P-51 Mustangs during World War II, before transitioning to civilian aviation as a commercial airline pilot and flight instructor. He had taught Sarah that technology was a valuable tool, but fundamental flying skills were irreplaceable foundations that could mean the difference between life and death when systems failed. Computers will help you fly more efficiently, her grandfather had explained during countless hours in his restored Piper Cub over Montana's Big Sky country. But they can't teach you to feel what the aircraft is telling you through turbulence, or how to read weather patterns that sensors might miss, or how to land safely when all your instruments go dark. That philosophy had guided Sarah through Air Force Academy training and into the competitive world of fighter aviation. She had volunteered for the most challenging assignments, consistently demonstrating that traditional flying skills could match or exceed computer-assisted performance. Yet the Air Force establishment remained convinced that her methods represented outdated thinking from previous aviation generations. During squadron briefings, other pilots often questioned why Sarah insisted on maintaining skills that modern technology had rendered unnecessary. They found her insistence on manual navigation and instrument interpretation difficult to understand when GPS systems and automated flight controls could handle those functions more accurately and efficiently. Captain Marcus Rodriguez, who flew in the formation position next to Sarah during training exercises, had repeatedly tried to convince her to embrace technological advancement. Rodriguez was considered one of the squadron's most proficient pilots, known for his ability to maximize the F-16's computer-assisted capabilities during complex missions. "Sarah, I don't understand why you're making flying more difficult than it needs to be," Rodriguez said as they prepared for a formation training flight. "The flight management systems can calculate intercept courses, manage fuel consumption, and execute precision maneuvers better than any human pilot. Why fight against tools that make us more effective?" Sarah checked her manual navigation equipment, including a magnetic compass, altimeter, and airspeed indicator that weren't dependent on electronic systems. Because those tools create dependencies that become vulnerabilities. What happens when GPS is jammed, or flight computers malfunction, or electronic warfare disables our digital systems? Rodriguez gestured toward his multifunction displays, which showed real-time tactical information, navigation data, and system status updates in full color. The systems have multiple backups and redundancies. The probability of total system failure is statistically negligible. Modern aircraft are designed to prevent the scenarios you're worried about. But Sarah remembered stories her grandfather had shared about pilots who became so dependent on their instruments that they couldn't fly safely when those systems failed. He had seen commercial aviators struggle with basic manual flying procedures during training exercises that simulated instrument failures. The skills that previous generations considered fundamental had atrophied through disuse. The other pilots couldn't understand why. Sarah refused to fully embrace the technological revolution that had transformed military aviation. They assumed she was either stubborn, afraid of change, or perhaps incapable of mastering the complex digital systems that required extensive training to operate effectively. In reality, Sarah had spent months learning every computerized flight system used by the Air Force. She understood their capabilities, their limitations, and most critically, their vulnerabilities. Major Patricia Williams, the squadron's assistant operations officer, had repeatedly recommended that Sarah update her flying techniques to match contemporary Air Force standards. Williams was known for her analytical approach to aviation, having earned advanced degrees in aerospace engineering and flight systems management before transitioning to operational flying. "Mitchell," Williams had said during Sarah's last performance evaluation, "your flying skills are undeniably proficient, but your methods are inefficient. Modern aviation requires rapid mission execution and precise system integration. Manual procedures slow response times and reduce tactical effectiveness. Sarah's performance scores weren't just proficient, they were consistently among the highest. In the squadron, her formation flying was precise, her weapons delivery accuracy was exceptional, and her situational awareness during complex missions was unmatched. The difference was that she took slightly longer to complete certain procedures because she verified computer calculations manually, a practice that instructors considered unnecessary in contemporary operations. The isolation Sarah experienced at Nellis wasn't entirely professional. During social gatherings at the Officers' Club, conversations often centered around the latest avionics upgrades, software updates, and technological innovations that were transforming military aviation. Sarah found herself excluded from discussions about systems she knew thoroughly but chose not to rely upon exclusively. Lieutenant Jennifer Chun, one of the squadron's newer pilots, had tried to bridge the social gap by inviting Sarah to join informal study groups focused on mastering advanced flight systems. "Sarah, we're meeting tonight to go over the new targeting software upgrades. Your experience could really help us understand how to integrate these systems more effectively." Sarah appreciated the gesture but declined most invitations. She spent her free time maintaining proficiency in manual flying techniques, practicing celestial navigation, and studying weather patterns that pilots could observe without electronic assistance. These activities seemed antiquated to her colleagues, but Sarah understood their value in ways that others didn't. The training philosophy that set Sarah apart had deep roots in aviation history. Her grandfather had learned to fly during an era when pilots depended entirely on their senses, mechanical instruments, and understanding of aerodynamics to navigate safely through challenging conditions. He had survived combat missions over Europe by developing an intuitive feel for his aircraft that no computer could replicate. Flying is about understanding the relationship between you, your machine, and the environment. Colonel Mitchell had taught Sarah during her formative years. Technology can enhance that relationship, but it should never replace the fundamental skills that keep you alive when everything else fails. That philosophy had saved her grandfather's life multiple times during his military career. He had successfully landed damaged aircraft using manual control when hydraulic systems failed. He had navigated through severe weather using visual cues when radio navigation was disrupted. Most importantly, he had developed the kind of instinctive flying ability that allowed him to recognize and respond to dangerous situations before they became critical. Sarah had inherited more than just her grandfather's philosophy. She had inherited his natural aptitude for aviation and his deep respect for the fundamental skills that made safe flying possible. During her Air Force Academy years, she had excelled in both traditional flying techniques and modern systems operation, but she had chosen to emphasize the manual skills that her instructors considered less important. The disconnect between Sarah's abilities and her commander's expectations created ongoing tension within the squadron. While her performance metrics exceeded standards, her methods were seen as problematic for unit cohesion and training efficiency. Other pilots struggled to work with someone whose procedures didn't match their technology-dependent tactical approaches. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Captain David Thompson, who served as Sarah's wingman during combat training exercises, had expressed frustration with her non-standard communication and navigation procedures. "Sarah, when you're calculating intercept courses manually while I'm using computer assistance, our timing gets misaligned. We need to operate as an integrated team using compatible systems." The challenge was that Sarah's manual calculations were often more accurate than computer-generated solutions, particularly in situations involving rapidly changing variables or environmental factors that digital systems struggled to interpret correctly. Her situational awareness was enhanced by constant mental engagement with flight parameters that other pilots had learned to delegate to automated systems. As Sarah completed her aircraft inspection and prepared for another training flight, she reflected on the isolation her methods had created. She understood why her fellow pilots preferred technological assistance. It was easier, faster, and generally reliable. But she also understood vulnerabilities that others chose to ignore, and she maintained skills that could prove crucial when technology failed under combat conditions. The morning's training exercise would involve formation flying, air-to-air combat maneuvering, and precision navigation, all skills that modern pilots executed with extensive computer assistance. Sarah would participate using the same manual techniques that had guided military aviators for decades. Before digital systems existed, she didn't know that this routine training flight would soon become a crucial test of traditional flying skills versus technological dependence, or that her grandfather's lessons about aviation fundamentals would prove more valuable than all the advanced systems that surrounded her. But as she climbed into the cockpit of her F-16, Sarah felt the familiar confidence that came from understanding her aircraft as more than just a computer-controlled machine. The fluorescent lights of conference room Delta cast harsh shadows across the polished table where Sarah sat, facing a panel of senior officers. Brigadier General Robert Sterling, commander of the 57th Wing, reviewed her personnel file with the methodical precision of someone who had overseen thousands of pilot evaluations throughout his distinguished career. The silence stretched uncomfortably as he flipped through pages documenting her unconventional training methods and consistently excellent performance ratings. "Captain Mitchell," General Sterling began, his voice carrying the weight of institutional authority, "your flight instructors have submitted reports expressing concern about your reluctance to fully integrate modern aviation systems into your operational procedures. While your performance metrics meet all requirements, your methods are creating training inefficiencies that affect squadron readiness." Sarah maintained her military bearing while internally preparing for another lecture about technological adaptation. These meetings had become increasingly frequent as her commanders struggled to understand why she insisted on maintaining capabilities that the Air Force considered redundant. "Sir, I believe manual skills complement rather than compete with modern systems. My proficiency ratings demonstrate that traditional techniques enhance rather than compromise mission effectiveness." Colonel Rebecca Hayes, the Wing's Director of Operations, interjected with statistical data pulled from recent training exercises. Hayes was known throughout the Air Force for her analytical approach to pilot development and her advocacy for cutting-edge aviation technology. "Captain Mitchell, your pre-flight procedures take an average of 18 minutes longer than squadron standards. Your navigation calculations require additional time that delays formation departures. Your insistence on manual instrument cross-checks slows mission preparation." The criticism wasn't entirely unfair. Sarah's thorough approach to aircraft inspection and flight preparation did require more time than pilots who relied primarily on computerized diagnostic systems. But her methods had also identified mechanical issues that digital systems had classified as acceptable, preventing potential in-flight emergencies that could have resulted in aircraft loss or pilot injury. "Ma'am, manual inspection procedures have detected maintenance issues that automated systems missed," Sarah responded carefully. "Last month, I identified hydraulic line stress fractures during pre-flight that diagnostic computers had classified as within normal parameters. The maintenance crew confirmed that the lines would have failed during high-G maneuvering." General Sterling consulted another document from her file, reviewing the incident report that Sarah referenced. The maintenance record supported her claim. Computer diagnostics had indeed failed to detect a potentially catastrophic mechanical problem that her visual inspection had identified. However, institutional momentum favored technological solutions over individual vigilance. "Captain Mitchell, While we acknowledge that your inspection techniques occasionally identify issues that automated systems miss, the statistical probability of such discoveries doesn't justify the routine delays your procedures create, General Sterling explained. Modern aviation operates on the principle of systematic efficiency. Individual variations in procedure compromise unit cohesion. The meeting represented a fundamental conflict between institutional priorities and individual expertise. The Air Force had invested billions of dollars in developing sophisticated aircraft systems designed to reduce human error and improve operational consistency. Sarah's insistence on maintaining manual capabilities challenged the underlying philosophy that technological advancement should replace rather than supplement human skills. Major Patricia Williams entered the conference room carrying a thick folder of documentation related to Sarah's training history and performance evaluations. Williams had been tasked with developing recommendations for addressing what senior leadership considered Sarah's integration challenges. Her research had revealed a pattern of resistance to technological dependence that extended back to Sarah's academy years. General Sterling, I've compiled a comprehensive analysis of Captain Mitchell's training progression and performance indicators, Williams announced as she distributed copies of her report. The data shows consistent excellence in all measurable categories, but persistent deviation from standard operational procedures in ways that affect squadron training efficiency. Sarah reviewed the document, noting that Williams had meticulously documented every instance where her methods differed from established protocols. The report included detailed timelines showing how her extended pre-flight procedures affected overall mission scheduling, statistical analysis of her navigation accuracy compared to GPS-dependent pilots, and assessments of her communication patterns during formation flying exercises. What the report failed to capture was the qualitative advantages that Sarah's traditional skills provided during challenging conditions. Her ability to maintain aircraft control during system malfunctions, her precision in adverse weather navigation, and her situational awareness during complex tactical scenarios all stemmed from fundamental flying skills that couldn't be quantified through standard metrics. Ma'am, these statistics don't account for mission adaptability when primary systems experience malfunctions, Sarah observed while studying Williams' analysis. Manual capabilities provide backup options that computer-dependent pilots lack during emergency situations. Colonel Hayes referenced additional data from recent training exercises where Sarah's squadron had participated in simulated combat scenarios. Captain Mitchell, during last month's Red Flag exercise, your formation's response times to tactical changes were consistently slower than units using integrated digital systems. Your manual calculations delayed engagement sequences that other formations executed more rapidly. The criticism highlighted a genuine challenge that Sarah faced when working with pilots who had trained exclusively with computer assistance. Her methods required more time for certain calculations, and her communication style differed from the standardized digital protocols that facilitated rapid information exchange between aircraft. However, Sarah had noticed that pilots who depended entirely on automated systems struggled significantly when those systems experienced even minor malfunctions. During the same Red Flag exercise that Colonel Hayes referenced, several pilots had become disoriented when electronic interference disrupted their navigation displays, while Sarah had continued operating effectively using backup instruments and visual references. Sir, I observed that when electronic countermeasures affected digital navigation systems during Red Flag, several pilots in other formations lost situational awareness, Sarah reported. My manual navigation techniques allowed me to maintain tactical effectiveness despite system disruptions. General Sterling made notes about Sarah's observations while considering the broader implications of her comments. Electronic warfare was becoming an increasingly significant factor in modern combat operations, with adversaries developing sophisticated capabilities to disrupt the digital systems that American forces relied upon heavily. Sarah's resistance to technological dependence might represent valuable insurance against such threats. Captain Mitchell, while we acknowledge the theoretical value of backup capabilities, the Air Force must prioritize training methods that maximize operational efficiency under normal conditions. General Sterling explained, "Our technological systems have proven reliability records that justify confidence in their performance." The institutional pressure Sarah faced reflected broader changes within military aviation culture. Younger pilots entered service having grown up with digital technology, making computer-assisted flying feel natural and intuitive. The manual skills that previous generations considered fundamental now seemed unnecessarily complicated to aviators who had never experienced system failures or electronic interference. Captain Jennifer Chun, who had recently joined the squadron after completing advanced flight training, represented this new generation of technologically integrated pilots. Chun was exceptionally skilled at maximizing the capabilities of modern aircraft systems, but she had never been required to demonstrate proficiency in manual flying techniques that Sarah considered essential. "Captain Mitchell, I've been assigned to observe your flight procedures and provide recommendations for integrating your methods with squadron standards," Chun announced as she approached Sarah's aircraft during the next morning's pre-flight preparation. "Colonel Hayes wants me to document how your techniques could be modified to improve efficiency." Sarah welcomed the opportunity to demonstrate her methods to someone who might understand their value, even if Chun's assignment was intended to identify ways to change rather than preserve traditional approaches. "Lieutenant Chun, I'd be happy to explain the reasoning behind manual inspection and navigation techniques. These skills complement rather than compete with digital systems." As Sarah conducted her thorough aircraft inspection, she explained the subtle indicators that experienced pilots could detect through visual examination and physical testing. She demonstrated how to identify wear patterns that might predict future mechanical problems, how to assess hydraulic system performance through fluid appearance and line flexibility, and how to verify flight control responsiveness through manual manipulation. Chun documented everything carefully, but her questions revealed the conceptual gap between pilots trained primarily with technological assistance and those who understood aircraft as mechanical systems that responded to physical laws. "Captain Mitchell, how do you know when these manual indicators are more reliable than computer diagnostics that use precise sensor measurements?" "Experience teaches you to recognize patterns that sensors might interpret differently," Sarah explained while examining the aircraft's control surfaces. "Computers evaluate measurements against programmed parameters, but they can't assess the subtle combinations of factors that indicate developing problems." The demonstration continued as Sarah showed Chun how to calculate navigation solutions using celestial references, magnetic compass headings, and dead reckoning techniques that didn't require GPS satellites or electronic navigation aids. Chun struggled with the mathematical concepts and spatial reasoning required for manual navigation, having trained exclusively with digital systems that perform these calculations automatically. "This seems incredibly complicated compared to GPS navigation," Chun observed while attempting to follow Sarah's calculations. "How can manual methods be more accurate than satellite positioning systems that provide precise coordinates?" Sarah understood Chun's confusion, having encountered similar reactions from other pilots who had never experienced GPS failures or electronic interference. GPS is extremely accurate under normal conditions, but it can be jammed, spoofed, or disrupted by atmospheric conditions. Manual navigation provides backup capabilities that maintain effectiveness regardless of electronic system status. The philosophical divide extended beyond technical procedures into fundamental approaches to aviation safety and mission preparedness. Sarah's training emphasized understanding and controlling as many variables as possible through human skill and judgment. while contemporary methods relied on technological systems to manage complexity and reduce pilot workload. Colonel Hayes arrived to observe Chun's documentation process, bringing additional personnel who were tasked with developing squadron-wide training standards that would address what leadership considered Sarah's integration challenges. Hayes believed that Sarah's methods could be modified or simplified to reduce their impact on operational efficiency, while maintaining any genuine safety benefits they provided. Captain Mitchell were developing new training protocols that will incorporate selected manual techniques into standard procedures, Hayes announced. However, these adaptations will need to be streamlined to match squadron timing requirements and digital system integration. Sarah recognized that the proposed solution would eliminate the depth and precision that made traditional techniques valuable while creating superficial compliance with institutional pressure to address her methods. Simplified versions of manual skills wouldn't provide the backup capabilities that made them important, but they would satisfy administrators who wanted to demonstrate responsiveness to her concerns. Ma'am, manual techniques require extensive practice and deep understanding to be effective during emergency situations, Sarah explained. Abbreviated versions won't provide reliable alternatives when primary systems fail. The institutional pressure continued building as Sarah's commanders sought ways to address what they perceived as a training problem that affected squadron cohesion and operational readiness. Her excellence as a pilot was never questioned, but her methods were seen as incompatible with Air Force modernization priorities that emphasized technological integration and procedural standardization. General Sterling scheduled follow-up meetings to review progress on resolving Sarah's adaptation challenges, making clear that her continued service with the squadron would depend on demonstrating improved integration with contemporary operational methods. The pressure was subtle but unmistakable, conformed to technological dependence or face assignment to positions where her traditional skills would be less disruptive to unit effectiveness. As Sarah left the conference room, she understood that her career trajectory would be determined by her willingness to abandon the manual flying skills that her grandfather had taught her and that she believed were essential for aviation safety. The Air Force had decided that technological advancement made traditional techniques unnecessary, regardless of their potential value during system failures or electronic warfare scenarios. She didn't know that within weeks, those traditional skills would become the only hope for saving an entire squadron, when sophisticated enemies demonstrated exactly why backup capabilities mattered more than institutional efficiency. The briefing room at Nellis Air Force Base buzzed with unusual energy as pilots from multiple squadrons filed in for what had been described as a routine training exercise. Sarah noticed immediately that the session included aviators from units that rarely coordinated operations, including pilots from the 64th Aggressor Squadron, electronic warfare specialists from the 57th Information Operations Group, and even Navy pilots from the Top Gun program at nearby Fallon Naval Air Station. Colonel Hayes stood at the front of the room beside a large tactical display showing satellite imagery of unfamiliar desert terrain. The topographical features didn't match any of the standard training ranges that Sarah knew well from hundreds of practice missions. More concerning, the imagery showed what appeared to be active surface-to-air missile sites and radar installations that seemed far too sophisticated for typical aggressor training scenarios. Today's exercise represents a new level of realistic combat simulation, Colonel Hayes announced to the assembled pilots. You'll be participating in Operation Desert Viper, a joint service training initiative designed to test pilot performance under advanced threat conditions. This exercise incorporates cutting-edge simulation technology that will challenge your tactical decision-making and system integration skills. Captain Rodriguez raised his hand from the front row. Ma'am, what type of opposition forces will we be facing during this exercise? The terrain imagery shows defensive installations that appear more complex than standard range targets. Excellent question. Captain Rodriguez, Hayes replied while advancing to the next slide. Desert Viper utilizes advanced AI-driven simulation systems that replicate enemy air defense networks with unprecedented realism. These systems will respond to your tactics with sophisticated countermeasures designed to test every aspect of your training. Sarah studied the tactical display more carefully, noting several details that didn't align with her understanding of training range capabilities. The surface-to-air missile positions showed overlapping coverage patterns that matched intelligence assessments of actual enemy defense systems. The radar installations were positioned using terrain masking techniques that suggested real operational planning rather than exercise simulation. Lieutenant Chun, who was seated beside Sarah, pulled out her tablet computer to review the digital mission materials that had been distributed electronically. Sarah, the navigation waypoints for this exercise are located in restricted airspace that I've never seen open for training operations. The flight paths take us remarkably close to areas that are normally off-limits to practice missions. The observation triggered additional concerns for Sarah. During her years at Nellis, she had memorized the boundaries of every training range and restricted zone in the Nevada Test and Training Range Complex. The coordinates provided for Desert Viper extended into areas that had never been used for pilot training, including sections that required special security clearances for access. Lieutenant Chun, those grid references place us near facilities that aren't typically included in training exercises, Sarah whispered quietly. The approach routes also seem unusually direct for a simulation that's supposed to test our tactical flexibility. Major Williams stepped forward to address questions about the mission timeline and coordination procedures. Desert Viper will commence at 0800 hours with 12 aircraft participating in the initial wave. Flight leaders have been assigned based on digital system proficiency and familiarity with advanced targeting platforms. Captain Rodriguez will lead Alpha Flight, Captain Thompson will command Bravo Flight, and Captain Chun will direct Charlie Flight. Sarah noticed that she hadn't been assigned a flight leadership position despite her seniority and experience. More unusual, the flight assignments seemed to group pilots based on their reliance on computerized navigation and targeting systems, rather than overall capability assessments. Traditional squadron organization would have distributed experienced pilots across multiple flights to ensure balanced leadership. Major Williams, Sarah asked, what are the communication protocols for this exercise? Will we be using standard frequencies, or are there special coordination requirements? Williams consulted her briefing materials before responding. Desert Viper incorporates realistic electronic warfare simulation, so you'll experience various levels of communication interference designed to test your adaptation to contested environments. Backup communication procedures will be essential for mission success. The mention of electronic warfare simulation raised additional red flags for Sarah. Realistic EW training typically occurred in controlled environments with extensive safety protocols and clearly defined boundaries. The casual way Williams described communication interference suggested either inadequate safety planning or deliberate understating of the exercise's complexity. Captain Marcus Thompson, who would be leading Bravo Flight, seemed excited about the opportunity to test his digital systems against advanced simulation technology. Major Williams, will our aircraft be equipped with the latest software updates for the targeting computers? I'd like to ensure we're using the most current threat recognition algorithms. All aircraft have been loaded with the most advanced software packages available, Williams confirmed. Your digital systems will be operating at maximum capability. During Desert Viper, this exercise is specifically designed to showcase the effectiveness of modern aviation technology. Sarah found Williams' emphasis on digital system capabilities suspicious. Training exercises typically focused on pilot development rather than technology demonstration, and the repeated references to showcasing advanced systems suggested priorities. That didn't align with educational objectives. Real combat training emphasized adaptability and backup procedures, rather than reliance on specific equipment configurations. During the detailed tactical briefing that followed, Sarah observed discrepancies between the mission description and the actual operational requirements. The flight profiles required extended periods at low altitude through terrain that would maximize exposure to surface-to-air threats, while the target engagement sequences demanded precision that would be difficult to achieve under the described electronic warfare conditions. Flight Lieutenant James Parker, one of the Navy pilots participating in the joint exercise, expressed concerns about the mission parameters during a break in the briefing. "Captain Mitchell, I've participated in Top Gun training exercises for 3 years, and this profile seems unusually aggressive for a simulation. The threat density and engagement timelines don't provide much margin for error." "I noticed the same issues," Sarah replied quietly. "The mission requirements seem designed to stress our systems and procedures beyond normal training parameters. Real combat missions typically include more flexibility for tactical adaptation." Parker consulted his mission planning materials, comparing the Desert Viper parameters with previous exercises he had flown. The navigation requirements also seem problematic. "We're supposed to maintain formation integrity while executing individual target engagements in areas with overlapping surface-to-air coverage. That's incredibly challenging, even with fully functional digital systems." As the briefing continued, Sarah mentally compared the mission requirements with her knowledge of actual combat operations that her grandfather had described and that she had studied during her tactical development. The Desert Viper profile contained elements that seemed designed to create specific types of system failures rather than test pilot capabilities comprehensively. Colonel Hayes concluded the formal briefing by addressing safety procedures and emergency protocols. Desert Viper incorporates realistic threat simulation, but all standard safety measures remain in effect. Emergency communication frequencies will be monitored continuously, and range safety officers will maintain oversight throughout the exercise. However, Sarah noticed that the emergency procedures described by Hayes were less comprehensive than those typically briefed for complex training scenarios. The backup communication plan seemed insufficient for the electronic warfare conditions that had been described, and the range safety oversight appeared limited for an exercise covering such extensive territory. After the formal briefing ended, pilots moved to individual aircraft for mission preparation and final systems checks. Sarah observed that ground crews were installing equipment configurations that differed from standard training loadouts. Her F-16 carried live ordnance rather than the inert training weapons typically used for simulation exercises, and the electronic warfare pods contained operational systems rather than training devices. "Sergeant Martinez," Sarah asked her crew chief, "why are we loading live missiles for a training exercise?" The briefing described Desert Viper as an advanced simulation. Staff Sergeant Martinez checked his maintenance forms before responding. "Ma'am, the work orders specify operational ordnance for realistic weight and balance simulation. The electronic systems also require live configurations to interface properly with the advanced simulation technology." The explanation didn't satisfy Sarah's concerns. Live ordnance on training missions required extensive additional safety protocols and special authorization procedures that hadn't been mentioned during the briefing. The combination of operational weapon systems and described electronic warfare conditions created risk factors that seemed inconsistent with training exercise safety standards. Captain Rodriguez approached Sarah's aircraft as she completed her pre-flight inspection using her characteristic manual procedures. "Sarah, are you detecting any issues with your aircraft systems? My digital diagnostics are showing some unusual readings that I can't interpret." Sarah had noticed similar anomalies during her manual inspection, including electronic interference patterns that suggested active jamming equipment in the vicinity. Her grandfather's training had taught her to recognize signs of electronic warfare, activity that computerized systems might not identify correctly. "Marcus, I'm seeing indications that there might be more electronic warfare activity in the area than what was described in the briefing. What kind of indications?" Rodriguez asked while consulting his tablet computer for comparison. Sarah pointed toward the horizon, where she had observed atmospheric distortions that could indicate high-powered radar or communication jamming equipment. Visual signs of electromagnetic interference that manual observation can detect. Your digital systems might interpret those signals as normal background noise. Rodriguez studied his electronic displays, but couldn't identify the patterns that Sarah was describing. His training had focused on interpreting computer-generated threat assessments, rather than recognizing environmental indicators of electronic warfare activity. "Sarah, my systems aren't showing any threat signatures beyond what's expected for the simulation." The conversation was interrupted by the tower's call for engine start and taxi procedures. Desert Viper was beginning exactly as scheduled, but Sarah's accumulating observations suggested that the 12 pilots participating in this exercise were about to encounter something far more dangerous than the advanced simulation they had been briefed to expect. As she strapped into her cockpit and began engine start procedures, Sarah reviewed her manual navigation equipment and backup communication systems. If her suspicions about the true nature of Desert Viper were correct, the traditional skills that her commanders considered outdated might soon become the only capabilities standing between her squadron and disaster. The radio crackled with standard departure clearances and formation instructions, but Sarah noticed subtle irregularities in the communication protocols that suggested someone was monitoring their frequencies with equipment that wasn't part of the normal training range infrastructure. Desert Viper was beginning, but what they were really flying into remained a dangerous mystery that only her grandfather's training might help her survive. 23 minutes into Operation Desert Viper, Sarah's worst fears materialized when actual surface-to-air missiles began streaking through the Nevada sky toward her formation. The sleek white contrails were unmistakably real ordnance, not the simulated threats that had been described during the morning briefing. Through her cockpit canopy, she watched in horror as a missile detonated dangerously close to Captain Thompson's F-16, sending deadly shrapnel fragments across Bravo Flight's formation. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Bravo Lead." Thompson's voice crackled through the radio with genuine panic. "We're taking actual SAM fire. These aren't training missiles, repeat. We have live weapons engagement." The radio frequency exploded with confused transmissions as 12 pilots simultaneously realized they had been deliberately deceived about the nature of their mission. Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos from Alpha Flight's position. "Desert Control, Alpha Lead requesting immediate clarification on exercise parameters. We're observing real missile launches from ground positions, but instead of the reassuring response that would confirm a misunderstanding or equipment malfunction, Desert Control's reply sent chills through every pilot participating in the operation. All Desert Viper aircraft maintain mission parameters as briefed. Continue engagement sequences according to assigned flight plans." Sarah's manual observation techniques had detected signs of actual enemy activity that the computerized threat assessment systems had either missed or misidentified. The surface-to-air missile sites weren't sophisticated simulations. They were operational weapons systems manned by hostile forces who had somehow infiltrated restricted American airspace and established a coordinated ambush targeting military aircraft. Lieutenant Chun's voice transmitted from Charlie Flight with a rising alarm. "My targeting computer is showing system failures across all platforms. Electronic warfare countermeasures are affecting digital navigation and threat assessment systems." Through her analog instruments, Sarah could see what her squadron mates' computerized systems couldn't properly interpret. The electronic interference wasn't part of a training simulation designed to test pilot adaptability under contested conditions. It was a systematic jamming operation intended to disable the digital systems that modern pilots depended upon for navigation, communication, and threat assessment. "All flights, this is Desert 7, Sarah transmitted using her assigned call. "Sign: electronic warfare countermeasures are targeting our digital systems specifically. Switch to backup instruments and manual navigation immediately." Captain Parker's Navy F/A-18 Super Hornet was the first aircraft to suffer a direct hit when his pilot's reliance on computerized defensive systems failed to provide adequate warning about incoming missile threats. The explosion sent debris raining across the desert as Parker ejected successfully but landed in territory that was now clearly controlled by enemy forces. "Parker's down in hostile territory," Flight Lieutenant Stevens reported from his wingman position. His aircraft took a direct hit from what appeared to be a Russian-made S-15 surface-to-air missile system. The revelation that advanced foreign military equipment was operational within American airspace transformed Operation Desert Viper from a training exercise into an active combat situation with international implications. Sarah realized that the 12 aircraft participating in this mission had been deliberately lured into a sophisticated trap designed to test enemy capabilities against modern American aviation technology. Major Williams' voice suddenly appeared on the emergency frequency. But her transmission revealed the depth of the deception that had led to this crisis. "All Desert Viper aircraft, you are not participating in a training exercise. Hostile forces have infiltrated the Nevada test range and established operational surface-to-air missile sites using advanced foreign military equipment." The admission confirmed Sarah's growing suspicions while raising terrifying questions about how enemy forces had gained access to restricted American military installations and established coordinated air defense networks without detection by base security or intelligence systems. "Major Williams, how is this possible?" Captain Rodriguez demanded through the radio. "How did enemy forces establish SAM sites on American territory without triggering security alerts?" Williams' response revealed institutional failures that extended far beyond simple intelligence oversights. Intelligence indicates that hostile operatives have been infiltrating defense, contractor facilities, and military installations for months. The exercise briefing was compromised by false information designed to lure experienced pilots into a testing ground for anti-American air defense tactics. Captain Thompson, who was struggling to maintain formation integrity as his digital flight management systems continued malfunctioning under electronic attack, reported additional disturbing observations. "My threat assessment computer is showing missile signatures that don't match any known training equipment. These are definitely operational military weapons." Through her manual navigation techniques, Sarah had maintained situational awareness, while other pilots struggled with their compromised digital systems. Her grandfather's training in celestial navigation and dead reckoning allowed her to determine their precise location and identify potential escape routes that electronic navigation couldn't calculate reliably under jamming conditions. "All flights, Desert 7 has navigation solutions using manual techniques," Sarah transmitted. "Current position is 37 miles northeast of Nellis, bearing 270. Recommend immediate egress to the southwest to avoid overlapping SAM coverage." But as the formation attempted to execute Sarah's recommended escape route, they discovered that the enemy had anticipated their tactical responses and positioned additional missile sites to cover likely withdrawal paths. The sophisticated coordination suggested extensive intelligence preparation and detailed knowledge of American pilot training doctrine. Lieutenant Sean's Charlie flight encountered the secondary ambush positions first when her GPS-dependent navigation led them directly into a missile engagement zone that manual calculations would have identified as dangerous terrain. Charlie lead taking defensive action. Shun reported that surface-to-air missiles launched toward her. Formation from concealed positions. The electronic warfare attack intensified as enemy forces demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything described in intelligence assessments about foreign military technology. Sarah watched her squadron mates' aircraft systems fail systematically as sophisticated jamming equipment targeted the computerized platforms that modern pilots relied upon for survival in hostile environments. "My flight management computer is completely offline," reported Captain Stevens from Delta. "Digital displays are showing system failures across all navigation and targeting platforms." Sarah realized that the enemy had studied American aviation technology extensively and developed countermeasures specifically designed to exploit the vulnerabilities created by over-reliance on digital systems. While her squadron mates struggled with disabled computers, her manual instruments continued providing reliable flight information that electronic interference couldn't compromise. Colonel Hayes' voice suddenly cut through the radio traffic with information that explained how this sophisticated ambush had been planned and executed. "All Desert Viper aircraft, this is Nellis Control. Intelligence indicates that Operation Desert Viper was compromised at the planning level by hostile operatives who provided false exercise parameters while positioning actual weapons systems in the target area. The revelation that enemy intelligence had penetrated military planning systems deeply enough to manipulate training exercises and position operational weapons on American soil demonstrated a level of infiltration that threatened national security beyond the immediate crisis facing the 12 trapped pilots. Nellis Control. How did enemy forces gain access to restricted airspace and establish coordinated air defense networks?" Sarah asked while maintaining manual navigation through the contested zone. Hayes' response revealed the full scope of the intelligence failure that had created this disaster. Preliminary investigation suggests that hostile operatives infiltrated defense contractor facilities responsible for range security and exercise planning. They used legitimate access credentials to position equipment and personnel while providing false information about exercise parameters. Captain Rodriguez's Alpha Flight attempted to engage the surface-to-air missile sites using their aircraft's air-to-ground weapons, but the electronic warfare countermeasures had also disabled their computerized targeting systems. "My targeting computer can't maintain lock-on against the SAM sites. Digital systems are too compromised for precision engagement." The tactical situation deteriorated rapidly as the pilots discovered that their extensive training with advanced digital systems had created dependencies that became critical vulnerabilities when those systems were compromised or disabled by sophisticated electronic warfare attacks. Sarah's manual targeting capabilities, developed through her grandfather's traditional training methods, remained unaffected by the electronic interference that had rendered her squadron mates' weapons systems ineffective. Her iron sight techniques and manual calculation procedures provided targeting solutions that digital computers couldn't generate under jamming conditions. All flights, Desert 7 can provide targeting solutions using manual techniques, Sarah transmitted while calculating engagement parameters for the nearest surface-to-air missile site. Manual targeting procedures are immune to electronic warfare countermeasures. But before Sarah could demonstrate the effectiveness of traditional targeting methods, the enemy revealed the true scope of their operational planning. Additional surface-to-air missile sites activated across the Nevada desert, creating overlapping coverage zones that trap the American formation in a carefully prepared kill zone designed to eliminate all 12 aircraft. Major Williams' urgent transmission confirmed that the situation had escalated beyond local crisis management capabilities. All Desert Viper aircraft. Additional hostile forces are activating across the Nevada test range. You are facing a coordinated military operation with international implications. The truth had fully emerged. Operation Desert Viper wasn't a training exercise that had encountered unexpected complications. It was a sophisticated enemy operation designed to test foreign military capabilities against American aviation technology while demonstrating vulnerabilities in digital systems that modern pilots couldn't overcome without traditional backup. Skills. Sarah realized that her squadron's survival would depend entirely on capabilities that the Air Force had been pressuring her to abandon in favor of technological dependence. The manual flying skills that her commanders considered outdated had become the only hope for 12 American pilots trapped in enemy-controlled airspace with compromised digital systems and operational weapons targeting their aircraft. The moment of truth was approaching when traditional aviation skills would either prove their continued relevance or fail catastrophically against sophisticated modern threats. The Nevada desert erupted in a deadly symphony of missile contrails and electronic warfare as Sarah watched her squadron disintegrate under the coordinated enemy assault. Captain Rodriguez's Alpha flight scattered in 3 different directions when their formation integrity collapsed after digital navigation systems failed simultaneously. Lieutenant Chun's Charlie flight had lost 2 aircraft to direct missile hits, with both pilots forced to eject over territory now controlled by hostile forces. Equipped with advanced capture and interrogation capabilities through her analog altimeter and magnetic compass, Sarah maintained precise awareness of her position while her squadron mates struggled with dark cockpit displays and unresponsive flight management computers. The enemy's electronic warfare attack had been designed specifically to exploit the technological dependencies that characterized modern American military aviation, leaving pilots helpless when their digital systems became unreliable. All remaining Desert Viper aircraft, this is Nellis Emergency Control, came the urgent transmission from Colonel Hayes. Intelligence confirms hostile forces have established a sophisticated air defense network across 47 square miles of restricted airspace. Immediate extraction protocols are authorized for any pilot capable of egress. But extraction required navigation and communication capabilities that most of the surviving pilots no longer possessed due to their compromised electronic systems. Sarah realized that her manual flying skills weren't just maintaining her individual survival, they were providing the only operational capability remaining for the entire formation. Captain Thompson's desperate voice crackled through the radio. From his damaged F-16, my hydraulic systems are failing and digital backup controls are offline. I can't maintain altitude without computer assistance for flight surface management. Sarah's grandfather had taught her manual techniques for maintaining aircraft control during system failures that modern pilots never learned, because computerized backup systems were considered sufficient for any emergency scenario. Bravo lead. Reduce throttle to 60% and use manual trim tabs for pitch control. Feel the aircraft's response through the control stick rather than relying on digital feedback. I don't know how to fly without computer assistance, Thompson admitted with growing panic. My training focused entirely on digital system integration. I've never practiced manual flight control procedures. The admission revealed the devastating consequences of technological overdependence that had eliminated fundamental flying skills from pilot training curricula. An entire generation of aviators had become incapable of operating their aircraft when electronic systems failed, creating vulnerabilities that sophisticated enemies could exploit systematically. Sarah vectored toward Thompson's position using dead reckoning navigation while calculating intercept courses manually. Her grandfather's celestial navigation techniques allowed her to maintain precise positioning despite GPS jamming that had left other pilots geographically disoriented in unfamiliar territory. Bravo lead, I'm approaching your 6 o'clock position. For formation support, Sarah transmitted while visually acquiring Thompson's aircraft through manual scanning techniques. Match my heading and airspeed using visual reference rather than digital displays. As Sarah assumed formation leadership for the surviving aircraft, She discovered that the enemy had positioned mobile surface-to-air missile systems along every logical escape route from the kill zone. The sophisticated coordination suggested months of operational planning and detailed intelligence about American pilot training doctrine and tactical procedures. Lieutenant Stevens, flying as Thompson's wingmen, reported additional system failures that confirmed the systematic nature of the electronic warfare attack. My communications equipment is receiving interference on all frequencies. Even emergency channels are being jammed or spoofed with false information. Sarah's manual radio procedures, learned from her grandfather's experience with vintage aviation. Communication systems allowed her to identify clear frequencies that electronic jamming couldn't affect completely. All flights switch to frequency 243.0 and use manual tuning rather than digital channel selection. Adjust by listening for clear signal rather than relying on automatic frequency management. The enemy demonstrated their tactical sophistication by launching coordinated missile salvos designed to force the American formation into specific geographic areas where additional weapon systems waited in ambush. Sarah recognized the tactical pattern from historical air defense studies that her grandfather had shared during their training sessions. They're herding us toward predetermined engagement zones, Sarah announced while calculating alternative flight paths that would avoid the obvious tactical traps. Enemy forces are using our predictable tactical responses against us. Captain Chun, whose Charlie flight had been reduced to a single aircraft after losing 2 planes to missile strikes, struggled to maintain formation discipline without her digital tactical display systems. I can't coordinate formation maneuvers without computer assistance. Manual formation flying requires skills I never developed. Sarah assumed tactical command of the remaining 8 aircraft by necessity rather than official authorization. Her manual navigation and communication capabilities made her the only pilot capable of coordinating defensive maneuvers and escape routes under the current electronic warfare conditions. All flights, this is Desert 7 assuming tactical lead, Sarah transmitted with authority that surprised her. We're executing manual formation procedures and visual navigation to aggress the hostile area. Major Williams' voice appeared on the emergency frequency with intelligence updates that revealed the international implications of the crisis. Desert 7. Hostage rescue teams report that captured pilots are being interrogated about American aviation technology and training procedures. Enemy forces are gathering tactical intelligence about our aircraft systems and pilot capabilities. The revelation that captured American pilots were providing enemy forces with classified information about military aviation capabilities elevated the crisis beyond immediate survival concerns. The enemy operation was systematically gathering intelligence that could compromise American air superiority for years to come. Sarah's formation encountered the enemy's most sophisticated defensive positions as they attempted to aggress through a mountain pass that offered the best terrain masking from surface-to-air missile sites. Hidden weapon systems activated from concealed positions, creating crossfire patterns that trapped the American aircraft in a carefully prepared ambush zone. Multiple SAM sites were activating from concealed positions, reported Lieutenant Parker, who had managed to evade capture after ejecting and was providing ground-based reconnaissance through survival radio. I count 12 active missile systems with overlapping coverage zones. The tactical situation had deteriorated to the point where conventional escape routes were impossible due to the density and sophistication of enemy air defense networks. Sarah realized that traditional tactical doctrine wouldn't be sufficient to overcome the systematic planning that had created this trap. Using navigation techniques that predated electronic warfare by decades, Sarah identified a potential escape route through terrain that enemy planners hadn't considered because modern pilots typically avoided areas without GPS coverage or electronic navigation aids. The route required manual flying skills that computerized systems couldn't execute reliably. All flights were executing low-level terrain following through Dead Horse Canyon, Sarah announced while calculating the precise headings and altitude. Requirements manually. This route requires visual navigation and manual terrain, following that enemy systems can't predict or counter effectively. Captain Rodriguez, struggling to maintain formation position without his digital displays, expressed concern about Sarah's proposed escape route. Desert 7, that canyon requires precision flying that I can't execute without computer assistance. The terrain margins are too narrow for manual navigation. Sarah understood that her squadron mates lacked the fundamental flying skills necessary for the escape route she had identified, but alternative options had been systematically eliminated by enemy tactical planning. All flights maintain close formation and follow my flight path exactly. Trust visual references and control stick feedback rather than digital systems. The formation approached Dead Horse Canyon, while enemy missile systems tracked their movement and calculated intercept solutions. Sarah's manual terrain-following techniques allowed her to navigate the narrow canyon at altitudes that surface-to-air missiles couldn't effectively engage, but her squadron mates struggled with the precision flying required. Lieutenant Chen's aircraft struck the canyon wall when she misjudged her altitude without digital reference systems, forcing another ejection and capture by enemy ground forces. The loss reduced Sarah's formation to 7 aircraft while demonstrating the deadly consequences of technological overdependence in combat situations. Charlie lead is down, Stevens reported grimly. Shun ejected successfully but landed in enemy-controlled territory. As the formation continued through the treacherous canyon passage, Sarah realized that enemy forces had anticipated even this desperate escape attempt. Advanced shoulder-fired missiles appeared on both sides of the canyon, operated by enemy personnel, who had positioned themselves specifically to counter low-altitude evasion tactics. The confrontation had reached its critical phase. Sarah's traditional flying skills were maintaining formation survival, but enemy tactical superiority and systematic planning had created seemingly impossible odds. 7 American pilots remained airborne, their digital systems compromised, facing sophisticated opposition that had prepared extensively for this engagement. Sarah's grandfather's training had prepared her for exactly this type of crisis where technological advantages became liabilities and fundamental skills determined survival. But the enemy had demonstrated tactical capabilities and planning sophistication that exceeded anything described in American intelligence assessments. The crisis was approaching its climactic moment when traditional aviation skills would either overcome superior numbers and tactical preparation or fail catastrophically against an enemy that understood American vulnerabilities better than American pilots understood their own limitations. Dead Horse Canyon stretched ahead like a gauntlet of hostile fire and impossible flying conditions. Sarah's formation would either emerge from this passage as proof that traditional skills retained crucial value, or they would become casualties of technological overdependence that had eliminated fundamental capabilities from American military aviation. The confrontation was reaching its decisive phase, and everything depended on whether one pilot's manual flying skills could overcome months of enemy preparation and systematic tactical superiority. Sarah's formation of 7 remaining F-16s burst from Dead Horse Canyon into open desert airspace. Having successfully navigated the treacherous passage through manual flying techniques that enemy forces hadn't anticipated or prepared to counter. Behind them, shoulder-fired missiles exploded harmlessly against canyon walls as their operators realized that American pilots using traditional navigation methods had outmaneuvered months of sophisticated tactical planning. All flights we've cleared the primary engagement zone, Sarah transmitted while conducting a visual damage assessment of her formation using techniques her grandfather had taught her for evaluating aircraft condition without digital diagnostic systems. Maintain close formation for mutual support during egress to friendly airspace. But even as they escaped the immediate kill zone, Sarah understood that their survival represented more than tactical success. The crisis had exposed systematic vulnerabilities in American military aviation that extended far beyond individual pilot training or equipment failures. Enemy intelligence had successfully exploited institutional overdependence on technology to create catastrophic operational failures. Major Williams' voice crackled through the radio with updates that revealed the scope of the intelligence disaster they had survived. Desert 7. Preliminary debriefing indicates that Operation Desert Viper was planned and executed by a joint intelligence operation involving multiple foreign military services. Your experience represents a systematic test of American aviation vulnerabilities. The revelation transformed their harrowing escape from a tactical victory into evidence of strategic threats that compromised national security. Enemy forces had demonstrated the ability to infiltrate American military planning, establish operational weapon systems on restricted territory, and systematically disable the technological advantages that formed the foundation of modern air superiority. Captain Thompson, whose aircraft had suffered significant damage during the Canyon Passage, reported system failures that illustrated the broader implications of their experience. My flight management computer is permanently offline, but manual flying techniques are maintaining full aircraft control. Digital systems weren't just jammed, they were systematically corrupted. Sarah's formation reached the boundary of friendly airspace where rescue helicopters and medical teams waited to assist with pilot recovery and aircraft damage assessment. But the debriefing process that followed would reveal institutional failures that went far beyond the immediate crisis they had survived. General Sterling arrived at Nellis within hours of the formation's emergency landing, bringing investigators from multiple intelligence agencies who needed to understand how enemy forces had successfully penetrated American military security and planning systems. The scope of the investigation would ultimately reach the highest levels of Pentagon leadership. Captain Mitchell, General Sterling began during the classified debriefing session. Your manual flying techniques appear to have been the decisive factor in your formation's survival. Intelligence analysts are trying to understand why traditional methods proved superior to our most advanced aviation technology. The investigation revealed that enemy intelligence had spent years studying American pilot training curricula and aircraft system specifications, developing comprehensive countermeasures specifically designed to exploit technological dependencies that had replaced fundamental flying skills. Their electronic warfare capabilities targeted vulnerabilities that American designers had never considered. Sir, enemy forces understood our technological dependencies better than we understood them ourselves, Sarah explained while reviewing tactical data from the engagement. They developed countermeasures for every digital system while ignoring manual capabilities that modern pilots rarely use. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, who had unknowingly participated in distributing compromised exercise information, provided testimony that exposed the depth of enemy infiltration into military planning systems. Intelligence indicates that hostile operatives had access to pilot training records, aircraft system specifications, and tactical doctrine development for at least 18 months. The revelation that enemy intelligence had systematically studied American aviation capabilities while developing targeted countermeasures represented a strategic intelligence failure with implications extending far beyond individual missions or training exercises. The technological advantages that America had developed over decades could be neutralized by sophisticated adversaries who understood systemic vulnerabilities. Captain Rodriguez, whose Alpha flight had suffered the heaviest casualties during the engagement, admitted the painful reality of modern pilot training limitations during his debriefing testimony. General Sterling, when our digital systems failed, I couldn't maintain basic aircraft control or navigation. My training assumed that technological backup systems would always be available. The admission reflected broader institutional problems within military aviation training that had systematically eliminated traditional skills in favor of technological solutions. An entire generation of pilots had become operationally dependent on systems that sophisticated enemies could compromise or disable through electronic warfare. Sarah's survival and successful tactical leadership during the crisis provided concrete evidence that traditional flying skills retained crucial value in modern combat scenarios. Her grandfather's training methods, which had been dismissed as outdated by contemporary military aviation culture, had proven superior to advanced digital systems under electronic warfare conditions. Captain Mitchell's performance demonstrates that fundamental flying skills provide essential backup capabilities when primary systems are compromised, General Sterling acknowledged during the formal investigation briefing. Her manual navigation and aircraft control techniques were unaffected by electronic warfare that disabled every digital system in her formation. The investigation team discovered that enemy forces had obtained detailed psychological profiles of American pilots, including assessments that identified which aviators maintained traditional skills alongside technological proficiency. Sarah's resistance to complete technological dependence had made her a specific target for elimination during the operation. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a Pentagon analyst specializing in aviation training doctrine, presented findings that revealed the systematic nature of American vulnerabilities. Enemy intelligence specifically targeted pilots who demonstrated technological dependence, while avoiding engagement with aviators who maintained manual backup capabilities. The revelation that enemy forces had used American psychological assessment systems to identify vulnerable pilots and avoid confronting traditionally trained aviators confirmed that Sarah's methods weren't just personally effective, they represented strategic capabilities that adversaries recognized as significant threats to their operational planning. Major Williams, whose unwitting participation in distributing compromised intelligence had contributed to the crisis, testified about the sophisticated deception that had made Operation Desert Viper possible. Hostile operatives used legitimate military planning channels to provide false exercise parameters while positioning actual weapon systems and personnel. The investigation revealed that defense contractors responsible for training range security and exercise coordination had been infiltrated by foreign intelligence operatives who gained access to classified planning systems and pilot assessment databases. The scope of the penetration suggested a systematic campaign targeting American military aviation capabilities. Sir, the enemy demonstrated tactical sophistication that exceeded our intelligence assessments about their capabilities, Sarah reported during her formal debriefing. Their coordination and planning suggested extensive preparation and detailed knowledge of American training doctrine and pilot psychology. General Sterling authorized immediate implementation of what became known as the Mitchell Protocol, requiring all military pilots to demonstrate proficiency in manual flying techniques, regardless of their primary aircraft assignments or technological specializations. The institutional vindication was comprehensive, but had come at the cost of multiple pilot casualties and compromised national security. The Air Force will immediately revise training curricula to emphasize traditional flying skills alongside technological capabilities, General Sterling announced during a classified briefing to senior Pentagon leadership. Captain Mitchell's performance proves that manual techniques provide essential backup capabilities that cannot be eliminated from pilot training. The transformation was remarkable but painful. Military aviation institutions that had spent decades emphasizing technological advancement over fundamental skills were forced to acknowledge that enemy intelligence had successfully exploited their modernization priorities to create systematic vulnerabilities in American air power. Colonel Hayes, whose career had been built on promoting technological integration in military aviation, admitted the institutional failures that had created the crisis during her testimony to congressional investigators. "We eliminated traditional training in favor of digital systems without considering that sophisticated adversaries might develop countermeasures for our technological advantages." Sarah's grandfather's training philosophy, which had been dismissed as antiquated thinking unsuitable for modern warfare, was formally incorporated into Air Force doctrine as essential knowledge for all military aviators. The validation was complete, but had required a near-catastrophic intelligence disaster to achieve institutional recognition. Captain Mitchell's traditional skills weren't outdated methods from previous aviation generations, General Sterling concluded in his formal report to Pentagon leadership. They were timeless fundamentals that remain essential for aviation safety and operational effectiveness when technological systems are compromised or unavailable. The investigation results were classified at the highest levels due to their implications for national security and international relations. Enemy forces had demonstrated capabilities and planning sophistication that challenged fundamental assumptions about American military technological superiority, requiring comprehensive revisions to training doctrine and strategic planning. Sarah received the Distinguished Flying Cross for her tactical leadership during Operation Desert Viper, but the personal vindication was secondary to the institutional changes that her survival had made possible. Traditional flying skills were restored to their proper place in military aviation training, ensuring that future pilots would possess backup capabilities that sophisticated enemies couldn't eliminate through electronic warfare. The crisis had ended, but its implications would influence American military aviation training and strategic planning for generations. One pilot's stubborn adherence to traditional skills had prevented a catastrophic intelligence disaster while exposing vulnerabilities that threatened the technological foundations of American air superiority. Sarah's vindication was complete, but the cost in pilot casualties and compromised national security served as a permanent reminder that technological advancement without fundamental skill preservation created dangerous vulnerabilities that sophisticated adversaries could exploit systematically. The revelation and recognition had come at a price that made victory bittersweet despite its strategic importance. 18 months after Operation Desert Viper, Colonel Sarah Mitchell stood before 300 newly commissioned Air Force pilots at the graduation ceremony for the first class to complete the revolutionized training program that bore her grandfather's name. The Thomas Mitchell Aviation Fundamentals curriculum had become the gold standard for military pilot development, combining cutting-edge technology with traditional skills that ensured operational effectiveness regardless of system availability. The transformation had been comprehensive and swift. Every Air Force pilot training base across the United States now featured dedicated traditional skills instructors, vintage aircraft for manual flying practice, and extensive curricula covering navigation techniques that predated electronic systems by decades. What had once been dismissed as museum pieces were now recognized as essential tools for developing complete aviators. Today's graduates represent a new generation of military pilots. Sarah addressed the assembled aviators from the podium at Randolph Air Force Base. You've mastered both advanced technological systems and fundamental flying skills that ensure mission effectiveness under any conditions. You've learned that technology enhances human capability rather than replacing human judgment. Among the graduates sat Lieutenant Maria Santos, whose exceptional performance in both digital systems, management, and manual flying techniques exemplified the balanced approach that had emerged from the Desert Viper lessons. Santos had volunteered for the most challenging training scenarios, consistently demonstrating that traditional skills and modern technology could be integrated seamlessly when properly developed. The institutional changes extended far beyond individual pilot training. Defense contractors had been required to redesign aircraft systems with manual backup capabilities that couldn't be compromised by electronic warfare. The Pentagon had established new security protocols preventing foreign intelligence penetration. Of training systems and pilot assessment databases, General Patricia Morgan, who had assumed command of Air Education and Training Command, presented the graduation address that reflected the profound shift in military aviation philosophy. The pilots graduating today understand that technological superiority depends on human expertise that cannot be electronically compromised. They've learned lessons that prevented a strategic disaster and will protect American air superiority for generations. Sarah's role had evolved from controversial squadron pilot to Director of Traditional Aviation Skills Development, overseeing programs that trained instructors for military bases worldwide. Her office at Pentagon headquarters contained her grandfather's compass and manual navigation equipment alongside advanced computer systems, symbolizing the integration that had replaced technological dependence. The international implications of Operation Desert Viper had triggered cooperation, agreements with allied nations who recognized similar vulnerabilities in their own military aviation programs. NATO allies, Israeli Air Forces, and Australian pilots now trained alongside American aviators in traditional skills programs, based on Colonel Thomas Mitchell's original teaching methods. Captain Jennifer Chun, who had survived ejection and captivity during Desert Viper, returned to active duty as an instructor pilot specializing in manual flying techniques for emergency situations. Her experience as a prisoner had provided crucial intelligence about enemy interrogation methods, while demonstrating the personal resilience that traditional training developed alongside technical competence. Students often ask why they need to learn navigation techniques when GPS systems are reliable and accurate. Chun explained to her advanced flying class at Luke Air Force Base. My answer is always the same, because enemies understand our technological dependencies and develop countermeasures specifically designed to exploit them. The captured pilots from Desert Viper had provided debriefing information that revealed the extent of foreign intelligence gathering about American aviation capabilities. Enemy interrogators had possessed detailed knowledge of pilot training, curricula, aircraft system specifications, and technological dependencies that made systematic countermeasures possible. Dr. Robert Harrison, who directed the Pentagon's new Aviation Security Research Division, had analyzed thousands of hours of enemy intelligence recordings obtained through prisoner exchanges and diplomatic negotiations. His findings confirmed that foreign military services had studied American pilot training more thoroughly than American instructors understood their own programs. Enemy intelligence identified specific psychological profiles that predicted technological dependence among American pilots. Harrison reported during classified briefings to congressional defense committees. They used our own assessment systems to target pilots who would become ineffective when electronic systems failed. The research had triggered comprehensive reviews of pilot psychological evaluation procedures and training assessment methods. New protocols prevented foreign intelligence gathering while identifying pilots who needed additional development in traditional skills alongside technological proficiency. Sarah's grandfather's legacy had expanded beyond individual pilot training into strategic planning that considered electronic warfare threats in every operational scenario. Military exercises now routinely included sophisticated electronic countermeasures designed to test pilot adaptability when digital systems were compromised or unavailable. Major Marcus Rodriguez, who had struggled most dramatically during Desert Viper when his digital systems failed, completed additional training that qualified him as a traditional skills instructor. His personal transformation from technological dependence to balanced capability inspired other pilots who had experienced similar vulnerabilities. Learning manual flying techniques after years of digital dependence required fundamental changes in how I approached aviation. Rodriguez explained during instructor training seminars. The process taught me that understanding aircraft behavior through physical feedback makes digital systems more effective rather than replacing human judgment. The training methodology that emerged from Desert Viper emphasized experiential learning that built intuitive understanding alongside technical knowledge. Pilots learned to feel aircraft responses through control stick feedback, recognize weather patterns through visual observation, and maintain situational awareness through constant mental engagement with flight parameters. Lieutenant Colonel David Thompson, whose near-death experience during Desert Viper had motivated his transition to training command, established mobile instruction units that brought traditional skills education to operational squadrons worldwide. His programs ensured that experienced pilots could maintain currency in manual techniques while continuing their primary mission assignments. The goal isn't to eliminate technology or return to previous aviation generations, Thompson emphasized during international instructor conferences. We're developing complete aviators who can maximize technological advantages while maintaining operational effectiveness when those systems are unavailable. The philosophical transformation was reflected in promotion criteria that now required demonstrated proficiency in both traditional and modern aviation techniques. Pilot advancement depended on balanced capability development rather than specialization in specific technological systems that might become vulnerable to enemy countermeasures. Foreign military attaches attended American traditional skills training programs as part of international cooperation agreements designed to strengthen allied aviation capabilities against electronic warfare threats. The techniques that had saved Sarah's formation during Desert Viper were now protecting Allied pilots worldwide. Captain William Brooks, a Royal Air Force exchange pilot completing advanced training at Nellis, represented the international appreciation for American traditional skills development. The RAF recognized that our technological dependencies created similar vulnerabilities to those exploited during Desert Viper. We're implementing comparable training programs based on American experiences. The institutional memory of operation. Desert Viper was preserved through detailed case studies that became required curriculum for all military aviation training programs. Future pilots would understand how technological overdependence had created systematic vulnerabilities and how traditional skills provided essential backup capabilities. Sarah's personal journey from controversial pilot to respected leader illustrated the broader transformation that had occurred throughout American military aviation. Her resistance to technological dependence, once viewed as stubborn antiquation, was now recognized as strategic foresight that had prevented catastrophic intelligence disasters. The memorial service for pilots killed during Desert Viper included dedications to the traditional skills training programs that honored their sacrifice through institutional changes that would protect future aviators. The ceremony emphasized that their deaths had meaningful purpose in developing capabilities that enhanced rather than replaced technological advancement. 24 months after Desert Viper, Sarah received promotion to Brigadier General with responsibility for overseeing traditional skills integration across all Air Force training commands. Her assignment represented institutional recognition that fundamental aviation capabilities required senior leadership advocacy and protection. General Mitchell's promotion reflects the Air Force's commitment to balanced pilot development that combines technological advancement with traditional skills preservation, announced Air Force Chief of Staff General Patricia Williams during the promotion ceremony. Her leadership ensures that future aviators will possess comprehensive capabilities that cannot be electronically compromised. The transformation was complete. Traditional aviation skills had been restored to their proper place in military pilot development, not as alternatives to technological advancement, but as essential foundations that made technology more effective while providing backup capabilities that sophisticated enemies couldn't eliminate. Sarah's office overlooked the flight line at Randolph Air Force Base, where student pilots practiced formation flying using both digital systems and manual techniques. The sight reminded her daily that her grandfather's wisdom had been validated. Through institutional change that would protect American aviation superiority for generations. The legacy extended beyond individual career advancement or institutional recognition. Traditional skills training had become a strategic capability that enhanced American military aviation while demonstrating to potential adversaries that technological countermeasures couldn't eliminate fundamental pilot competencies. The story that began with mockery of outdated methods had concluded with transformation of American military aviation training. One pilot's stubborn adherence to traditional skills had prevented strategic disaster while creating institutional changes that would benefit aviators for decades to come. Sarah's grandfather's compass still guided navigation training for thousands of pilots worldwide, ensuring that fundamental skills would never again be dismissed as obsolete relics unsuitable for modern warfare. The legacy was secure and American. Aviation was stronger for having learned that tradition and technology could enhance rather than compete with each other. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.